Part 1. The event that I have chosen is Australia Day. Australia Day is held on the 26th of January each year and is the day Australians come together to celebrate Australia and being Australian. Various events are held on this national public holiday, and as suggested by the National Australia Day Council 2011, this day provides an opportunity to look at our past, consider our present and recommit to making our future even brighter. The NADC also provides ideas to promote its aims to connect the diverse cultural influences amongst individuals within the multicultural Australian community. Australia Day symbolises the anniversary of the settlement of the First Fleet from Great Britain in 1788. However, this settlement did not only involve those that were present on the ships that entered Australia on this day. The land was already inhabited by native Aboriginal people prior to European settlement. Modern racial conflict supports that this day in 1788 for the Aborigines was a day of invasion. The British Empire's dominance over the native Aborigines during penal settlement reflected, as suggested by Keating 1995, the European white race's deep-seated racial tenets, McMaster Austin 2005, toward the Aboriginal inferior black race, Keating 1995. The settlers, as suggested in Erickson's theory, McMaster and Austin 2005, operated hierarchically, placing themselves as whites at the top above all others. In this case, the others identifies the Aboriginal people whose lives were valued relatively low and violence was an everyday occurrence, McMaster Austin 2005. White racial identities have carried throughout generations in what McLaren and Torres 1999 view as race and racial categorisation thrown up in order to sustain and justify systems of inequitous social and economic relationships, McMaster Austin 2005. The multiracial collaboration and conflict, as termed by Mullen, has been presented throughout Australia's history ever since 1788. The social culture contributes to an individual's sense of self, experiences and life chances, Frankenberg 1993. The continued assertion of racial difference in the social context leads to difference amongst individuals as well as the Australian community and its national identity. One organisation that highlights their aim on Australia Day to end the disparity between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians in one generation is Generation 1. The link on this screen titled Article 1 provides an example of their commitment. Australia Day is identified as an opportunity within the social context for the citizens of Australia to look at and break down individually what is the history behind celebrating Australia and the history behind every citizen that identifies themselves as Australian. Part 2. Using the event as curriculum. The ideas that I put forward within this section would be encouraged from my own behaviour as a teacher that is free of racism, and workings would consistently support school policies and practices that do not discriminate, either directly or indirectly, toward culture, language or ethnicity. This is intended to ensure a supportive anti-racism and anti-discrimination environment. A positive attitude toward diversity in the school community, the wider community and the nation as a whole will be displayed and encouraged. Freedom for contribution as well as encouragement given would aim to create an environment that makes everyone's contribution possible. All cultures would be valued, each child sharing their perceptions and their learned cultural ways would be acknowledged by all in the group, teacher included. These differences would be reflected on as a group and would be accepted as a method of inclusion. This inclusive environment would work toward overcoming disadvantaged and marginalisation of some groups within the classroom and then would aim to ripple outward into the broader community. Values will be recognised within this topic. This is encouraged and enforced at the beginning of the subject matter. The addressing of the expected values by all within the Australian school community would aim to help guide the students' behaviours. An example of this could be a student that may display white racism during this topic. The values will be utilised as reinforcement of what behaviour is desired to work toward what McMaster and Austin 2005 indicate whiteness studies to aim toward whites eliminating whiteness as a socially constructed category in order to overcome racially coded systems of disadvantage. If an individual's behaviour is not encouraged to be interrogated at this point, the instance of disadvantage and marginalisation would not likely be overcome. The values of Australian schooling would be utilised as a model of what the Australian people, as a collective group and as individuals, are desired to form their character on. In groups, students would examine the Australia Day website, which offers historical information to help inform students of the historical influences that make up both collective and individual identities of Australians. Students would be encouraged to find information on and explore the following key points taken from Part 1 of this presentation. The meaning of each point would be discussed prior to this activity starting, giving all students the opportunity to understand the content. This is to ensure that every student is able to engage in the work equally. What does Australia Day symbolise? Australia Day, settlement or invasion? What contributes to Australian and community identity? Values, dominance, equality of social and economic relationships, cultural diversity, individual sense of self, experiences and life chances, racial discrimination through assertion of racial difference. The aim of the exploration into the above questions, Australia Day organisation site, would seek to highlight difference, dominance and diversity within the context of both the collective and individual identities throughout the nation of Australia. Students would be required to share their collected information through class discussion, one group at a time, and each group member taking their turn in speaking to the class about their group's findings. The students would then progress on to identifying the significance of human rights. Students would examine instances throughout history when rights have been respected or not respected through the history of Australia. This is also available on the Australia Day website. Students will be encouraged to examine what is the significance of Generation 1's aim toward reducing discrimination. Also have students examine the Generation 1 article that was highlighted within Part 1 of this presentation and encourage students to share their ideas and some positive influence that this has on collective and individual identity. Ask the students to paint a picture that represents what they believe could be achieved through the Generation 1 work. Listen to the Generation 1 song that is available on the Generation 1 website, Hands Across Australia, whilst the children work on their artwork. Discuss the song's meaning with the group casually, whilst the children continue their artwork and clarify at the end what this song is about. Link this to the historical findings on the Australia Day event and examine any identified change or new understanding of individual self-identity after the song has been played.
And I help you think of all the things that we could do if we all joined hands across Australia.
Recognise examples of stereotyping through the media. This lesson would aim toward illustrating and identifying how the assertion of racial difference within the social culture of stereotyping can and does lead to disadvantage and marginalisation of some individuals, groups and communities. Also to be highlighted would be the significance this has on the labelling of the Australian identity. The articles on the right would be utilised as examples of current issues that outline attitudes and behaviours that contribute to social cohesion, as well as identifying some contemporary tensions that occur in the current culturally diverse society. Examine each student's perception of whether they view these articles as displaying instances of dominance, whether the articles display equality or inequality of social relationships, and do students think that situations like these outlined in the articles could have an effect on an individual's sense of self, experiences and life chances. Finally, illustrate through linking back to the values how these articles do display examples of dominance through racial discourse, and invite and encourage students to write an article displaying an Australian's behaviour that supports the values previously shown. Indicate and encourage that an individual's racial behaviour is significant in the making up of their identity and the identity of a community, as well as the potential this has for demonstrating what it is to be Australian.